there is like potential like anti-aging hotels you can build in orbit, and people come there, stay, get refreshed, get a bit younger, and come back to Earth. I mean, there's some research as well about like people traveling to space, and they get like their like telomeres longer, which means that you're getting younger.
Hey everyone, this is Prashant and I'll be host of the VC 10X podcast. And today we have Alexandra Vidyuk with us. Alexandra is a partner at Beyond Earth Ventures, a venture partner at Aloniq, and founder of Space Ambition. Alexandra is deeply passionate about deep tech and scientific evolution. In this episode, we talk about what space tech and deep tech opportunities is she most excited about. What are the major hurdles in colonizing Mars? Space tourism. Will we in our lifetimes be able to space travel and see different planets, asteroids, galaxies? Can space travel reverse aging? How do we minimize carbon emissions generated by space tech? How does she segment the space tech landscape? She also gives us a view into the future of space tech in the next 10, 30, and 50 years. So, without wasting any time, let's dive straight in. This episode is sponsored by my own podcasting agency called Podcast 10X, where I help VCs start and run their own podcast. While I was running VC 10X, this podcast that you're listening to right now, I asked my VC guests, why don't you start your own podcast? I mean, it's the best form of marketing for VCs. As they say, VC is a people play more than even a capital play. A podcast enables you to put your people at the front, your portfolio founders, your partners, and co investors. It's a great way to build a brand and win competitive deals. It activates all your marketing channels in a single shot, be it YouTube or blog post or newsletter or social media. Everything gets activated in a single shot. And I get the same response from all the VCs that it's a lot of work and we don't have the time for it. I said, all right, let me handle the work for you, from pre recording, editing, publishing to making social media clips. All you have to do is show up on a call, hit record, do the recording using the well researched outline we provide you with, and you're done. We handle everything else. You know what they said? All right, let's give it a shot. So if you are a VC and want to up your marketing and branding game, I'd love to work with you. And if you're thinking there are too many VC podcasts already, remember there are way more VC firms out there. And if you're not standing out, you're losing out. So if you want to work with me on starting your podcast, go to podcast10x.com and book a call today. I'll add the link in the description and show notes below. Look forward to working with you. Hey, Alexandra, so good to have you on the VC10X podcast. How are you doing?
Hi, Prashant. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure having you on. To start things off, can we first have your story and how you started investing?
Yes, sure. So my name is Alexandra Vidyuk. I'm based in Singapore, and I'm a partner at Beyond Earth Technologies investment firm, and also I'm a venture partner at Aloniq VC. So my career started in banking actually, and then after 10 years in banking, I had my own fintech startup. And then I realized that startup and VC is the world I want to be. So it's more dynamic, more ambitious. There's more visionary, right energy and everything. So and I decided at some point I was thinking, I had a degree in physics and I've done banking and fintech startup. What's the best career move for me? And deep tech VC, space tech VC came as a natural choice for me. So combining my degree experience and also my passion.
Absolutely. Kind of marrying the two spaces, banking and space tech and physics, right? That's amazing. Great. So, my next question is what space tech or deep tech opportunities are you most excited about?
Yeah, so my personal investment thesis is how do we invest in technologies which will enable us long term? So any deep tech which can help us to build economies outside of Earth, outside of our planets. That's why it's called Beyond Earth. I mean here, orbital economy, moon, Mars, anything like asteroid mining. But that can be a wide range of technologies. That can be energy, chips, and be robotics, like any in situ resource utilization. So kind of taking a slice of these technologies which can enable space tech in the future, space economy, but also the companies which have immediate revenue potential today. So that's kind of I'm tapping into two markets. The terrestrial one, which has proven business model today, but I'm also kind of putting my money on exponentially growing the kind of space tech economy, right? So that's the companies which I like. Yeah.
Right. That's awesome. And you also run a newsletter which is called Space Ambition alongside your co founder. And there are multiple pieces that you and your partner have written there. And they piqued my curiosity a lot. And I was very interested in those. And I'm very curious about space. I'm not a space guy or a physics guy myself, but just looking up in the sky, I have that curiosity what's up there, right? So I'm that kind of guy. So the next few questions will be me trying to explore that curiosity, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners would have similar questions about space as well, right? So I'll start with Mars. That's a dream that Elon Musk has kind of made us believe that okay, that is a possibility, right? So how realistic do you think is the dream of colonizing Mars and making it habitable?
I think so. I think kind of there's like several ways how you can look at this question, right? So first of all, Elon Musk mentioned on his Twitter account that he planned to send the first Starship to Mars in 2026, which is like 2 years from today. Obviously, from the first ever Starship going to Mars until a proper Mars colony can take several decades. And then also a colony doesn't mean properly habitable planet. It's not like terraforming it. We are like probably centuries away from terraforming Mars. So if you think slowly and slowly about okay, if you can have maybe first base managed by robots, kind of have some presence, some running some experiments. That can happen within this decade, right? Potentially, if you get, if it takes like what, 6, 7 months to get to Mars, right? If you launch something 2026, that, 2027, we might be there already. But like slowly, we need to kind of start thinking as well, kind of why do we need to go to Mars? It's another question, right? If it's the resources which we don't have today, is that a launch pad to asteroid belt again to mine resources or minerals which we don't have today? Like, we need to have economic reason, right? There is no, I mean, people don't do colonization just for the sake of colonization. There has to be some business reason as well. And I mean, obviously, there is plan B. That's what Elon Musk also saying, right? We need to have plan B if something happened with Earth. But I think generally, I don't think it's a dream. I think it's a proper project, which is now kind of not a project, but initiative, which is now people trying to do kind of, obviously led by like SpaceX and Elon Musk. But also it's a huge, enormous, international collaboration required, lot of funding, lot of technologies which we don't even have today. So it's not an easy, but I think it's totally doable. And I also like to say what Elon Musk mentioned recently, that the window for our civilization while we can build something on Mars is limited, and it's actually now. So 20 years later, 30 years later, we might have another COVID. We might have like, third world war. We might have asteroids kind of, hit our whatever. So we might lose this. We might actually go back in our development as a civilization. So if you want to build a Mars colony today, we have to do it now. So that's why I like to invest in this type of technologies.
Right. Absolutely, that's very interesting. And an important point you made there is that it's not just a fantasy that we want to get to Mars. It is for practical reasons, and it is for business reasons, and two, it is our plan B that if something happens to Earth, or then we have an option to go somewhere, and our civilization still survives that. Amazing. And what would you say are the major hurdles in us colonizing Mars or getting there, and even for business purposes? What are the major hurdles in that?
I think for humans, first of all, there's extreme radiation, right? Which we don't even like have a lot of studies. We don't have a lot of exposure. We don't even have a lot of statistics of what, what's happening if, most of the people, most of the astronauts which go to space, they still stay within the magnetic field of Earth, right? So we don't actually have a lot of examples of what happened with people who been outside of that circle, that field. Um, Another one is absence of atmosphere, right? So how are we going to generate oxygen? How are we going to keep it within domes or some units or whatever? How is extreme temperatures, right? Another how are we going to generate energy? How are we going to keep the temperature up? How are we going to keep this, the kind of closed loop system to support life? Um, Plus, lots of other things. How we're going to like what we're going to use for fuel, what we're going to use for energy source, how we're going to build all of the systems and so on. So like a lot of open questions. Some of them are engineering problems, some of them are still scientific problems. So in this kind of two different areas, I would say. And some of them may be already easy kind of investable startups which you can build today. So that's kind of fully ready for execution.
Absolutely. And another one on the same line is how habitable can Mars become? And what are the kind of resources, both financial and technological, that will be required to make it happen?
Um, I don't think anyone know exact answer to this question today. I think I can only give you my best guess. So if you're talking about proper habitability, right, that's probably we're talking here about terraformation, like Mars terraformation, which is, there's a lot of different theories how we can do that, a lot of different, if you go and Google on YouTube, you will find a lot of different videos how people suggest beaming lasers to Mars to warm it up, release some of the oxygen and take some of the CO2 from Venus and kind of slowly start moving to Mars. So there's a lot of kind of crazy ideas, or maybe not crazy at some point. That's obviously we don't even have technologies as such today to do that, or we don't have enough resources or energy or the technology stack. I think what probably is more reasonable today is build some kind of isolated units and isolated domes where people can stay and kind of work together with robots. Probably most of the population will be still robots and or kind of some kind of uh, how they call it, humanoid robots. Uh, in terms of the resources, I've seen different estimations how much I think it's kind of you're talking here about dozens of billions kind of that's very high level estimations. I think I've seen like 60 to 100 billion, or maybe even like going into trillion dollars, US dollars budget, what it will take for us to build a presence, like permanent presence on Mars. Um, the this type of collaboration, I don't see how it can be done by one company today unless we discover, I don't know, an amazing source of some kind of very rare earth mineral on Mars, which we don't know today yet. That probably will have to be an international collaboration between governments, private companies, some of the funds, some of the endowments, and so on. In terms of the engineering, I know the stack of technologies, I think which we know already. Obviously, we have rockets, launch technologies, which is SpaceX is taking care of. We need to think about energy. We need to think about food production, oxygen production, decarbonization, robotics, network communications on Mars because we don't have, GPS systems. We don't have mobile network. How are we going to communicate? Um, in-situ resource utilization. So how are we going to take regolith from Mars and maybe 3D print something, and any syn biotechnologies, how, for example, okay, you can take um, uh, any chemical material or any mineral, and just kind of play around with molecules and atoms and create something which you need. This is kind of synbio is now big developing area. I think we was also kind of curious about what's going on there, and I think this is kind of essential technology stack for Mars. And I think, of course, already mentioned about radiation protection, shielding, or are we going to create, at some point in the future, artificial magnetic field, which will protect at least some areas of Mars? And of course, I think a lot of biological studies as well. What will happen with long-term isolation? How are we going to procreate? Obviously, it's a different gravity, different radiation level. Are we be able to procreate ourselves there, or we will be always have to send new humans to Mars? If you're going to do any genetic modifications, right? To kind of, is it like completely new area, right? And no one have done any study about this, right? So that's a huge unanswered, areas of questions. Yes.
Right. Yeah, that's very interesting. Many different aspects need to be figured out, and a very insightful answer there. Thank you. And now let's talk about space tourism. Another area everyone is excited about. That okay, maybe in future and inside our lifetimes, we'll be able to get in a rocket and travel space and see asteroids and maybe some planets or the moon. A bit closer look at that. Uh, give us a view into that world, that how possible is that. We had the recent Starship launched by SpaceX. I don't know if I'm getting the name right, but that was for built for that purpose, I guess, but you can tell me more.
Yeah, sure, sure. So I think, I mean, first of all, space tourism is already kind of well developing industry, right? So you have Blue Origin, you have Virgin, each of them sending people to suborbital flights. I think Virgin, I think, sold more than 1,000 tickets for that. Means that, anyone can, if you have enough money, if you have enough courage, you can go and buy ticket and fly to space. That's kind of becoming the mainstream, and I think that would be only getting more and more like popular. And I think companies such as Space Perspective, they do like a huge balloons, and you can go up, like, in the stratosphere. You can, like, you can watch, like, the black sky, and so on. I think the next, probably the products which SpaceX is going to develop is kind of fly to the moon and fly around the moon. That's a kind of another like commercial touristic flight we will see. I've heard, not sure if it's a gossip or not, but people can already put a deposit to fly to Mars. I'm sure at some point we'll be having, yeah, touristic flights. That's probably, not sure exactly if it's going to happen within our lifetime. Definitely orbital flights, suborbital flights, potentially orbital hotels, like it's a hotel in orbit where you can stay maybe 1, 2, 3 days, kind of for holiday. Moon definitely will happen this decade, right? Mars maybe next decade. So not sure about like asteroids and other other star systems. That's probably bit a bit outside of our lifetime.
Got it, got it. And when I think about space tourism, I am always reminded of the movie Interstellar, right?
Of
And
course.
in that, he just goes into so many different worlds, and the time, how the speed of time changes, right? And that was so interesting.
Yeah.
Uh, so, how far into space can we possibly go?
So if you think about where the man-made object went today, right? They still, none of them left the solar system, right? So we have Voyager 1, Voyager 2 just going through the Oort cloud, which is the like asteroid kind of dust cloud beyond Pluto. They just started getting out of there, right? In the horizon, like new horizons as well. So that's what kind of that's where like and they've been launched like what 40 years ago, right? So they're still kind of going. I think so far with the current propulsion technologies, we don't really have any means to travel interstellar. I think obviously people developing and we have breakthrough project trying to do like the solar wind small sails which will go to the nearby star. Uh, but again, that's probably going to be like 20% of speed of light. Not and so the closest star is like 4.2 uh, light years right away. So even if you do like 20% multiplied by 5, that's going to be like 20 years. As of today, we don't have any cryo sleep technology. So, for example, if you want to sleep for 20 years and wake up, uh, then see, okay, yeah, like you haven't missed anything, right? That's again, technology is something which we will have to develop. So far, I think with the current propulsion technologies, it takes like how like 3 days to travel to moon, 6 to 7 months to travel to Mars, and then maybe how long is that? 3 years to travel to Jupiter. Like so, I don't remember exact numbers, but I think we're still talking here about years as in months. So I think this is something which we still can do by ourselves. As as people used to travel on ships like several months, right, before they invented planes, right. So I think this is something which probably can afford as well during our lifetime to travel for months.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very interesting. And this might be a nonsensical question, but I'll still ask it. We have different people trying out anti-aging therapies and different ways to stop aging, right? So can space travel become a way to stop aging or slow down aging? That you go outside and then come back after some time, and the Earth is moving at its own pace, but when you come back you're still somewhat around the same age when you left, but everything else has changed so much, so you get a view into the future because of that. Because you see maybe 50 years down the line how Earth would look like by traveling just maybe for 5-10 years into the space. How nonsensical is that, you tell me?
I mean, in theory, it's kind of time relativity, right? I think I would probably say space has enormous potential to actually push anti-aging, right? And in other ways, right? So, for example, we are talking here about zero gravity environment in orbit, and a lot of pharmaceutical companies started thinking about producing special type of medicine or kind of production in space. We're talking here about protein crystallization, for example, which can help with cancer treatments or stem cells, organoids, or uh, like other areas. So the reason why people are considering producing something in space is because in zero gravity, the molecules can grow bigger, more symmetrical. They don't collapse under gravity, not just molecules, but for example, if you want to build like organoids, right? Like you don't have to like put on anything. It can just develop organically, through the space. Uh that was not possible like 10 or 20 years ago because the launch cost was super expensive. But now with the current SpaceX capabilities and even the Starship is coming, the launch cost will be around $100 per kilogram. Means that if you want to produce some, of course, you need to bring it back later as well, which is also will be additional cost. But if you want to produce something which is quite expensive, but still maybe a kind of a medicine or important product which people will buy on Earth, you can still have margin, right? Even with the cost of launching and getting it back. So that's why I think this is actually has more potential for anti-aging and like some medical treatment for us. Also, I think there's someone mentioned there is like potential like anti-aging hotels you can build in orbit and people come there, stay, get kind of, refreshed, get a bit younger and come back to Earth. I mean, there's some research as well about like people traveling to space and they get like their like telomeres longer, which means that you're getting younger. Obviously, this research is not fully confirmed. It's got just, I guess, I think it's just a reaction of like our bodies. I also have seen another startup recently which does like embryos creation in space. And apparently, when you create embryo in space for IVF purposes, that also has some special condition because there is no gravity, and then the embryos, there's a higher chance of creating embryos, and there's also kind of the different genetics kick off because of the condition, like kind of triggering other genetics, which potentially, but this is like very sci-fi but at this stage. It's not fully proven research, but people are experimenting.
Right. That's very, very interesting. Thanks for sharing perspective on that. And I'm glad that there was some validity to to this weird thought that I had. Awesome. And now let's talk about this argument that's often posed in regards to space spending. People say that okay, there are so many problems on Earth, and there are so many things that can be solved with their dollars that are being spent on space. Which some people feel is not a productive way to spend money. But what's your view on that? How do you feel about it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's kind of what people normally don't realize that a lot of climate crisis actually being managed from space, right? So the way how we monitor emissions is only the only way you can do it using drones or satellites, and satellites are typically better because you can do several like times a day. You can do like you can do different wavelengths. It's obviously bigger territory and everything. So as of today, for example, we have around 36 different satellite constellation tracking different type of greenhouse gases around the world in different locations, and we still don't have the full picture of what's going on. So, and this is what kind of always fascinates me. We talk about climate change. We talk a lot about what's going, like how we need to kind of measure, kind of introduce new regulations, but we don't have the full data set. And I think people should do more of this and should do different sensors and different technologies, kind of understand the full picture in real time. And then if you actually model the full climate and the full emissions, what's going on, and then we should think about what exactly the measures which we should take. Also, we think about renewable energy, right? It's a lot of projects now which we see, which is generating energy in space and trying to bring it back to Earth. For example, you have an energy in space, solar, lot of solar panels. You don't have clouds, you don't have atmosphere, so you don't have any like resistance, right? You have sun 24/7, and it's actually quite cold there, right? So it's kind of it's not getting hot. So like if you can collect all of this energy and then beam it back to Earth using like I don't know, microwave or laser, for example, and then have a big rectangle on Earth which will collect the data. This is like pure green energy, right? This is like we're not talking about here about any pollution. Or let's imagine if you can bring some of the data centers to orbit. Data center is one of the most like dangerous offenders of climate today, of our environment, right? The amount of energy they consume, the amount of pollution they bring, this is like a lot, right? So what we can bring them to orbit, and there's several projects I've seen already, including I think Amazon is trying to do one, and then they can get the energy from sun, connect to the internet immediately to satellites, and then beam energy back to not beam, but uh, you don't there's no pollution, right, as well, because it doesn't go back to Earth. So this type of technologies, I think, that can actually help to stabilize our climate and our pollution kind of situation. Long term, I think people are thinking about any toxic productions that should be done in orbit if possible. and then keep the earth like green garden for living, right? That should be our eventual goal. And I think our technologies now get into the right state where we can do it. Plus, it's kind of economically, commercially viable to do so. Another thing I already mentioned about medicine and pharma production in space, you're creating better medicine, better products which can help to cure more diseases on Earth. This is also a sustainability question for me. And this is something which, I mean, of course, lots of people say this is so many inventions and innovations which have been created by like NASA programs and other space programs, which now improved our life today. For example, baby formula milk is used, is actually was originally developed for astronauts. Or like the heart pump originally was also produced for one of the space projects, right? That's kind of that's examples always good to observe, but it's kind of they use it today because of space programs. So I think it's unfair to say that we don't like space is like orthogonal to the climate. It's actually I think goes in the same direction. Every dollar we spend on space actually help us to bring better, greener, more sustainable Earth.
Absolutely. Those are very good points there on how space exploration and the development is actually helping us humans living on Earth live better lives because of that. Great. And let's now talk about sustainability in space tech because what we know is that whenever rockets are going off, there are a lot of carbon emissions that are taking place, a lot of fuel that is consumed. How does space tech try to move towards the direction of sustainability and try to minimize carbon emissions and try to get towards sustainability in that aspect?
I think we can think about several different directions here. So first of all is using reusable rockets, right? And I think that's not now what SpaceX is championing and other startups are trying to copy as well, and other companies, other nations as well. So it's definitely right the way to go. Second is propulsion fuel. So we can think about better propulsion systems such as nuclear, fusion, solar, water-based propellant, or like kind of every rocket launch company, they use different propellant, right? Different propellant has different kind of toxic levels, right? So I think we can try to think about this new technology here and kind of try to encourage and vote as well for this. And I think we as investors as well, for example, we always support green. I mean, I always try to support kind of how we can support the green technologies, right? Another option I think here is as well is in situ resource utilization. So can we launch it not from Earth, but can we build a launch pad on the moon? For example, moon has lost gravity. We have regolith there, which you can use kind of maybe to create some fuel, like build a small factory on the moon, on Mars, which will be producing fuel, and you launch it from there. You don't launch from Earth. That's I think also very kind of long term probably solution which will have to think about, and also we should try use as much resources possible in space. And I think this is also coming back to your previous question about sustainability on Earth, right? So when we talk about sustainability, we are running out of some minerals on Earth. We're not even thinking about it. And I recently watched a presentation about, kind of the chemical, like Mendeleev chemical table, like elements table, right? And some of the elements are going to run out like in the next 10, 20 years because there's no new supply on Earth, right? Like where are you going to find them? Exactly where we're going to find them in space, helium free, for example, on Earth. A lot of asteroids on Moon. Mars has obviously asteroid belt, right? So the mining the resources in space and bringing back to Earth is actually a way for sustainability as well. So the more we do that, the better for us to is kind of helping us sustainability of space tech industry, but also bringing back the missing elements we need on Earth.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, that's very interesting. I think space mining is a big industry in itself within space tech, right?
It's a projected big industry.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't exist as of today yet. We do have the third wave of startups trying to build now different technologies, but we haven't actually done any significant mining which has been delivered regularly to Earth. I think we've done like a couple of, like government
Mm-hmm.
research missions, but there are several companies that are trying to pursue helium-free mining on the moon. There are several trying to bring some platinum or something else from the asteroid belt. There's several companies trying to scan the moon and see what type of elements or what type of asteroids on kind of we can find there, but there's no data yet about that. So there's like lots of different kind of innovators and startups trying to find the ideas. But I would say it's not yet kicked off properly.
Right, right. So there's a gold mine there, but we are still figuring figuring out the technology how to get it right. Awesome. As a space tech investor, how do you segment the space tech landscape? What are the different categories do you have under space tech?
And different people do it in a different way. I think some people say like downstream, upstream. I mean, as I mentioned at the beginning, I think I like to see, like I try to kind of use the deep tech uh, sectors to kind of look at like, what is the intersection with space tech, for example. Okay, if you have energy startups, can we see what type of, applications and technology we can use in space in the future or today, for example, and that can be good or opposite. Okay, so if we see space tech startups, how we can see it, like, is it actually helping us to with some energy solutions in space? So I normally use this one, but obviously there's like, of course, there's like standard classical, like I think people talk about, launch services, satellite technologies, including Earth observation, communications. You have human space flight, infrastructure, robotics, in situ resource utilization. Yeah, so like this step may easily Google. There's a lot of different um, uh, kind of structures. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And when you're evaluating a deal, what are the key things that you're looking for that influence your decision whether to invest or not?
I think like people normally say that deep tech is difficult, right? Because it's not a software startup. You have to evaluate not just like not just the technology, but actually sometimes the technologies can be you should always ask yourself question: is it scientifically possible? Is it engineering um, problem which can be solved, right? In addition to all other questions you ask about market, product demand, the team, can team execute it? Will customers pay? Is it the right business model? Do we have the unicorn potential and so on? So this is all standard questions we asking anyway. For the deep tech, we always ask about, okay, it has a different sales cycles, right? It's longer sales cycles. It's sometimes people don't know what they want to buy. It will take like maybe 4 years to just get a contract with a big company, right? We always try to kind of call experts within the industry and see if there's engineering or scientific kind of possibility we need to confirm, because obviously even having a physics degree, I obviously don't know every single technology which has been developed today, right? In space tech, it's even more difficult because industry is very small. There's a lot of government money. There's a lot of trends, a lot of decision making done by. It's not like there's not like market forces working. So there are some specific projects, specific programs you need to know. That's what makes you a good space tech investor, is kind of understanding of what's going on, but also like understanding that you need to apply all the normal VC questions and we see techniques. Uh, Especially I think for SpaceTech and DeepTech, a lot of founders coming from technical background and can be like engineers or scientists before. This is not typical you see kind of as a founder, for example, in Silicon Valley, right? They're not like typically good salespeople or naturally good business development leaders or people leaders, right? So it's important to understand the potential, right? And I think a lot of people don't understand that because like, oh, so ex McKinsey or like, the presentation is not very polished. It's probably not a good founder, right? I think for me it's different because I coming from this background by myself and I can see the potential and I can see, okay, it's not just about being super polished, but it's about the potential of the person and how the person can develop and what's the it's not for me it's about grit. I think the main quality of the founder is grit. It's not about person who can do a 5 minutes polished presentation and sell, but it's about who's going to work 10 years in a row, no weekends, constantly, after each failure, having a strength and energy to make another step. And and the composition of the team as well, the right skill set. Especially in space tech, you typically have to have one industry knowledge, but also you have to have someone who understands the technology in space industry and everything. So you have to have the right skill set, or at least the right advisory board composition, for example, and so on. So it's super difficult to do the due diligence of space tech companies. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Coming to my last main question before we go into the rapid fire round, and this one is, can you give us a view, your own view of how you look at the future in the next 10, 20, 30, and 50 years time frame?
Yeah, sure. I think then the next 10 years, probably we will see the current big projects developing. A lot of things will be, I would expect a lot of in-space manufacturing things going to develop. You're going to have commercial space stations. You have several companies doing that. They will give homes and V workspaces for other startups who are going to produce semiconductors, pharma products, um, and some biological maybe products as well. So that's kind of the orbit would be more commercial, more available. The moon program will be developed, right? So we have NASA led international program which called Artemis, which is like 93 billion program. They're planning to build a permanent base, the station, a gateway station which will be orbiting moon, collecting the data and some kind of network and energy supply and communication infrastructure. We'll probably see this progressing a lot, like significantly. But plus, also we have China program uh, on the moon as well, which kind of also trying to go on dark side of the moon and they're trying to collect some of the samples as well. Probably also trying to build some stations there. That's probably next 10 years. Um, 20 years, I would say we probably see a lot of, advancement in robotics and AI. Probably even more regular flights. Probably will have some base on Mars already. Maybe even would be able to bring something from the asteroids belts and might be able to go holiday in orbit. Maybe some orbital hotels, maybe some moon hotels. That's um, potentially can happen. And I think in 50 years as well, I mean, 20 years already kind of also mentioned if you build business, a lot of business kind of in-space manufacturing, like production factories in orbit, then we can start slowly moving some data centers and toxic productions to orbit. And in 50 years, who knows? I don't know. Maybe you'll be like, people will be having kids on Mars and built like Dyson sphere around sun and kind of collecting all the energy coming out of sun and kind of fueling our own, I don't know, artificial space stations as we have in Interstellar movie, right? I think at some point it will happen, right? So I think yeah, exactly. I also hope that we will have some breakthrough in energy production, something such as fusion, and some breakthroughs in propulsion technologies. Hopefully, we can think about technology which can bring us to the interstellar travel as well, not just interplanetary travel, but interstellar as well.
Right. That answer got me so excited, and I'm sure it did for so many listeners. And I hope you get to invest in a bunch of companies that make some of those things come true. Now, let's do the rapid fire round, wherein I'll ask you six quick questions about the investing you're doing, and you have to give six quick answers. Sounds good? Right. So, the first one is, what are the sectors and regions you invest in?
Hmm. Deep tech, space tech, global,
Great. What's the typical stage of investment?
pre-seed, seed, series A.
Got it. Do you lead rounds?
Uh, we haven't, but we can
Okay. What's the typical check size you put in?
up to 500,000.
Okay. Where can founders get in touch?
LinkedIn, Substack, um, email.
Okay. Last one, where can our listeners follow you?
Uh, my main blog is Substack, plus also follow me on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Right. And I'll also make sure to put your Substack link in there because there's some very exciting stuff in there. A lot of the kind of conversations we had, they have written pieces about them, so they are very interesting and goes deeper into what we were able to talk about here. Thank you so much for making time for this, Alexandra. It was a very exciting conversation, and I learned a lot of things. And I'm very excited and optimistic about the future after this conversation. And I wish you happy investing.
Thank you, Prashant, for having me. It was good questions. Yes, happy to join today.
Thank you. My pleasure.